You just press play on the Last Breath Huntcast, home of the Huntroversy. We're here to entertain, educate, and engage. And in case you didn't know, you only live once. But if you do it right, once is enough. Don't waste it. Good morning and welcome to another exciting episode of the Last Breath Huntcast. I'm Grant. Nobody is in here with me today. Garrett's actually traveling, but I'm going to give him a call and talk about something that we did really recently. In fact, it was last night. He and I went on our first saddle hunting adventure together. We got a brand new saddle system in the mail, and we're just going to kind of review the pros and the cons for a rookie saddle hunter, of somebody that's interested in potentially getting into saddle hunting, because we saw some definite things, like first glance. I want to preface this podcast by saying we are not experts by any means in doing this, and this is just a total rookie's point of view for somebody that's kind of looking to maybe potentially get into saddle hunting, or it's something that they've seen and don't understand and would like to know maybe just a little bit more about it. But again, our level of knowledge on this subject is going to be about 3 out of 10, but we did get it done last night. So we're going to talk about that hunt. I'm going to give Garrett a ring right now, and we're going to go over the potential benefits, drawbacks, things that we kind of see from our lens and our perspective on hunting out of a saddle.
Hello.
Yo, you got me?
I can hear you, buddy.
Okay, so today we're talking about our saddle hunt that we went on last night, and we killed a doe. So we're going to go. I want to talk about the benefits and the first impressions, I guess. I preface this podcast by telling the listeners, we are not experts by any means. And in fact, I wasn't hunting out of a saddle. I was in a regular tree stand. You were the one that was hunting. We were actually shooting a piece of content for a client, and they wanted us to get some content of the saddle, this brand new product that they've launched. And you were the one that, you've killed one deer this year, which was Crunch, and your elk, and that's basically filled your freezer up almost. So I was already fully loaded, and it was your turn to whack a doe. So we set ourselves in a position where we could do so. But before that, let's talk about your first impressions when you actually stepped into the saddle. So comfort level out of 10. What would you give your comfort level out of 10 as you're actually hanging on the side of the tree?
Well, let me give my first impressions, and I'll get into the comfort because I think it kind of plays a factor into it.
Okay.
And mind you, to all the listeners here, like you said earlier, we grew up hunting in deer stands and deer blinds,
and we still do.
We still do. This was not something we kind of sought out, but it was requested, and we jumped on it. The first impression to me was just it is a significantly smaller blueprint than a stand. Even the box itself. I mean, when we unboxed it, I bet it was 50% of the actual box is how big the saddle and the ropes and the carabiners and everything was. So from a standpoint of size, of sheer volume, it is smaller than a stand. It is slightly lighter than a stand. There's some companies out there that manufacture some really ultralight, compact, mobile setup deer stands. So it's not like it's half the weight, I would say, but it is lighter than any deer stand that I know of. And then getting into it, it's something new, and it's not going to feel perfect at first. It'd be like somebody who's never wore cowboy boots before that puts those on. Is it comfortable? Yes, but it's different also. So we broke it out, and the same day we opened it is the same day that we killed with it. We jumped into the pine trees in my yard and just kind of hung out, and it's different. So with a deer stand, I feel like if you don't have a very good stand that has adjustments or a comfortable seat, you'll either have some back strain or you'll have discomfort in your ass just from sitting on a piece of steel or a piece of wood. So with this, I do think that it eliminates those factors, because my back never once got fatigued, which I thought would be one of the bigger things to kind of have discomfort, but it wasn't. My back, my shoulders, all of my upper body was perfectly fine throughout. And the thing that struck me the most is if I were to be a public land grinder, I wore the actual saddle itself, around my waist when we walked in. Now, I don't know if that's how you're supposed to do it or not, but it just made sense to me. It's got a clip that goes around your waist, which just holds the saddle in place, and then you have two leg straps similar to like a safety harness that holds it around your groin. And with those three things clipped on, I mean, we walked. How far do you think it was from the truck to the tree? Probably 500 yards.
Yeah, I was gonna say somewhere between 500 and 700. Yep.
So I mean, for me to walk with it that far, it didn't slip or give, and it's lightweight. It does feel like you're wearing a Depends, because it's a little bit bigger. But it didn't add any warmth. It's not like I got hot. It's not like the same kind of thing as if you're packing a heavy jacket on the backpack or something. It didn't hold the heat there. And then getting up the tree with it wasn't bad at all. Again, it's pretty minimalistic to the front. I had a side pouch that carried my two ropes, my lineman ropes, and the carabiners. But that was off to my right side. And I get up the tree, and I would say that the overall comfort, without a small platform, I just stood right on the top of my sticks. I would give it, a 7 out of 10, I would say. I think if I would have had a platform, that number has opportunity to increase. But with me just standing on the sticks, which is, I don't know, a 1/2 inch by 4 inch piece of aluminum, I did feel strain in my calves. And that's just because I didn't have like a platform to be able to like set my whole foot on, right? I was either on kind of like the ball of my foot or the heel of my foot, switching it as the hunt went on to kind of keep pressure off of your calves, really.
Sure. I think the most interesting thing, I guess, when we opened up the box that I thought, like, my first impressions is, like you said, how light it is. I believe that on the box it says it was 4 pounds or about in the ballpark of 4 pounds, so it's not very heavy at all. And it looked to me like how I would describe it would be a tree harness, just without the top straps that go over your shoulders. Similar dynamics, and you've got kind of this nice cushy seat in between your leg holsters, so that kind of cushions and cradles your butt. And then when we got it open as well, there's 2 different really important ropes, I felt like, when you got up the tree and when we were messing around with it in your yard, which were the one that kind of holds you to the tree left and right, kind of horizontally, and then another one that allows you to, like, that holds you up higher. So you've got one rope system that kind of goes roughly from your hips around the tree, kind of not going really up the tree at all, that kind of holds you tight to the tree. And then you've got a separate one that goes above you, like head height, maybe a little higher, that allows you to put all your weight on that. And that was something that you kind of figured out about 2 hours into it. I'd say we were hanging up there for about a little less than 3 hours, and after a while you were like, man, my calves are going to be on fire if I stand like vertically away from the tree. And then so you kind of let the top rope take all that weight, and you kind of squatted down a little bit. And we were talking about, if we were to do this again, it would probably be a smart idea to have that little tiny platform, just so that way your calves aren't burning all day, because like an all-day sit, do you think if you were like in that relaxed position that you could make an all-day sit in that, in your opinion?
Yeah, and so to go on to what you were saying, you have 2 lineman belts, one that attaches at an attach point of your hips, and then you have what they call the bridge, which is another piece of rope which allows you to kind of have a rope attached at a higher point, similar, closer to like your shoulder height. And now when I was standing, have my feet on the top and I was leaned away from the tree, the position that you would be when you shoot, almost all of my weight was on the lineman's belt around my hips, correct, that were connected there. But when I watched a couple videos of saddle, and then a way to take pressure off of your feet is to literally, bend your knees into like almost a seating position. And when you do that, the weight transfer switches from to your hips to that upper rope, and it allows you to really just relax. So your legs kind of go on each side of the tree, and you're essentially straddling the tree at this point. And that was very comfortable. I mean, I bet I sat in that position for the better part of an hour during the hunt at one point in time, just to kind of take the pressure off of my calves. My legs themselves never were fatigued once, and I do think, like what we said, having a small platform to slip up on the top of that stick, which several companies make, different little tree saddle platforms, just to have the ability for the entire foot to sit and take the weight. Because, like, if I was on the ball of my feet, my calves were stretched with my heel down. And if I was on the heel, then my calves are with pointed toe down. So it wasn't like it's not like the equivalent of standing on your tippy toes. It's be like trying to stretch your calves for like 2 hours at a time. It just that eventually at a certain point in time, like, it's not in the relaxed position, and it's just strained. It's not like I was standing on my toes or standing on my heel. It was just getting stretched from my body weight.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. The conversation that we were kind of having, whispering, talking back and forth about 10 or 15 yards away, because like I told everybody at the beginning of the podcast, I was sitting in a tree stand about 10 yards behind you. And our strategy, because we wanted to, we didn't want to just go out and, mess around and hang out with the saddle. We were trying to kill a deer. And so we set up on the downwind side of this feathered edge path that we created, which basically is a log jam of trees, which kind of funnels the deer in and out of our food plots a certain way. We were sitting up on the downwind side of that, and I just was sitting further back, and I could notice, like, your range of motion, I would say, like in a deer stand. And like I said, I want to preface what I'm about to say by we're not experts, and I'm sure that, the package, at least when we opened it up, it said 360 degrees shooting. And I'm sure that if you had a platform or like multiple sticks around the tree, like I've listened to a couple podcasts with Eberhart on them, and he kind of lines it up so he has multiple sticks around the tree, so he can legitimately pivot 360 degrees. So I can see where you would be able to shoot 360 degrees around the tree. But to me, as you were kind of sitting there, without doing a whole ton of movement, it is late season, there is no cover out there other than just the branches and the wood of the trees. There's no greenery left. I think where you were, you probably had about 90 degrees comfortably without doing a whole lot of movement of area in which you could shoot. You could shoot basically directly to your west, and then to every distance in between your direct west and basically your direct south. But I think in order to make a kill happen at a different spot, luckily we got that doe to play ball with us, and she went exactly where we needed her to be. But I think if she would have done something different, I think it would have been a little bit trickier, given the fact that we only had one stick for you to balance on. I don't know how that would have worked and made that happen. So the deer is coming in, and you grab your bow, which, by the way, we had to bring a bow hanger for you, and you put your bow hanger up there and hoisted your bow up kind of on a line after you got ready in your saddle.
Yep.
As you picked your bow off of your tree, how was the comfortability of actually being able to maneuver your bow and shoot it, draw it without being seen by that doe? Because she didn't have any idea we were there, and I didn't, I guess, get your perspective. But did you feel pretty concealed as that doe was coming in, and you were kind of hidden behind the tree? Were you just kind of peeking around the tree, or what were you seeing?
I'll answer your first question first, because you threw a couple of them out there. To draw my bow, it just kind of instincts took over. I never felt unsecure, and I said that in, like, I believe the video. There wasn't ever a point, once I got up and I have both my lineman's ropes attached, I never felt unsafe. We're so used to get up the tree, hook on with the harness, and once you're hooked on, you have that like relief. But I do think with the saddle, you kind of have that constant reminder, because you either have pressure on your hips or like on your upper back, depending on where you're resting at, that you're like, okay, I'm locked in, right? And actually, I feel like when the less comfortable I felt was when I was either putting my belts on or getting down, because you don't have that connection to the tree. So when I went to draw, I just did it as normal, right? I do think you think a little bit more, and if you hunted with the saddle or practiced with the saddle, it would come more second nature, because you do have these ropes that are kind of in the front of your body. They don't at all inhibit you to draw your bow, but they're just there where they wouldn't be with a deer stand. But when it came down to drawing my bow, I think it just instincts took over. I drew back, I anchored in, I felt solid. It was fine. And then getting into the question of like concealability, that is one thing that I do think a saddle has an advantage over a deer stand. So one thing that's about a saddle is that you don't leave it out. Now you can leave your sticks up, so you can just climb your sticks and not have to put your sticks on as you go, but your platform isn't there. And you know, everybody has their opinions on whether deer notice deer stands, but if you think that the deer would see a deer stand, especially with you not in it, you leave with the saddle. You know what I mean? So it's not up. And then as far as being in a stand physically versus a saddle, I do feel like there's a little more concealability, because you have, you know, some degree of being able to hide behind the tree. And so when she was walking down the path, and it worked out that way, right? But and it kind of has to, the way you shoot. The tree was in between the deer and I, so I was always behind it, just peeking my head around one side or the other. And the other thing is too, is I just think standing vertically is a little bit more natural. It's more of a normalized line in nature than a deer stand. So when you're in a deer stand, your platform is usually perpendicular to the tree. Your tops, your knees are perpendicular to the tree. There's a lot of hard angles, I guess. And then in nature, really 90 degree right angles aren't found hardly ever, you know. So I do think that just to an eye, that being standing vertically and having more of a sweep to your body outline and contour rather than hard lines could help with concealability.
That makes a ton of sense. Another question that I had for you was, you know, when you're physically hunting in a deer stand and you are standing up, there is some element of being able to draw power from your legs to actually draw and rotate the cams on your bow. So my big thing was, if you kind of lose a little bit of that power in your legs, like when you were drawing your bow back and now you lift way more than the average person by a lot, and you draw 75 pounds, so you've got the heavier mods on your Matthews, which is a smoother drawing bow in general. But do you think that, you know, if you were a guy that didn't necessarily lift as much, and you had, you know, a 70-pound or a 65 or a 60-pound bow, that you would consider backing off the poundage if you were going to go exclusively into a saddle, just because you can't gain and gather as much power from your feet? I mean, essentially, we're talking about the difference of you kind of sitting on the floor drawing your bow, you know, if you're just hanging there in that koala position, if you were to choose to do that, or, you know, versus standing in a deer stand. I feel like it's a little bit easier to gain power from your legs. What's your thoughts on that question?
So my 2 cents on that question, it is a big factor. Unfortunately for me, I'm healthy and I'm strong and it works out great. But I do think that if you were one of those people that, you know, let's say you're trying to increase your draw weight, you're maybe just getting into archery, or like my wife, right? She's constantly trying to reach a couple more pounds on her bow. If you're on that edge where you've seen people where they kind of have to drop their shoulder to draw their bow, I do think it would be a big issue here, because you're relying solely on upper body strength. I think what if it was me and I was thinking about hunting out of a saddle, Mike Crawford, our buddy, taught me this trick a long time ago. And if you sit on a stool or a chair and you pick your legs up, like you hold your legs up so they're not touching the ground, and draw your bow, then your draw weight is not too heavy. However, like what you were prefacing, if you can't draw your bow without being quote unquote grounded, like if you have to sit in a chair with your feet down, or if you have to stand with both of your feet, you know, touching the ground to draw your bow, it would be a struggle to do that with a saddle. So I think a rule of thumb would be, if you're going to try to saddle hunt, you know, sit on a stool, sit on a chair or the edge of the counter or something, and make sure your legs are free hanging. They can't touch the ground. and try to draw your bow. And if you can do that, then you should be able to draw it out of a saddle.
Sure. So what do you think about, I guess, the time of the year in terms of the, I suppose, the ease of getting in and out of the certain type of tree that you're hanging in? So it's really cold right now. Did you feel like, in terms of your saddle, that it was necessarily quieter than a deer stand, less creaky than a deer stand, etc.? What are your thoughts on the quiet factor of a saddle versus a stand?
I mean, that is something too. I honestly didn't even think about that. But if you kind of had one of those more budget-friendly deer stands, sometimes they don't always have the rubber grommets, and oftentimes they're made of steel and not aluminum. And as you alluded to, when it's cold, metal strains and it can pop or tink, or if you shift your weight, it might pop. That was something I didn't even think about, but the saddle was super quiet. It honestly was, because if you really, other than the stick that you choose to stand on, there's no metal, there's no cables, there's no bolts. The point of contact to the tree is a rope, which is quiet by nature, and the saddle is made of textiles. It's cloth, canvas, and other components, so it's quiet. So I do think it could be quieter, but I don't think it could be any quieter than like a quality deer stand. Our stands, we always use double ratchets. I shouldn't say always. Most times we do, and we make sure they're secured well, and we don't have really any issues with the stands we use now with stealth, I should say. But I mean, we've used them in the past where we've had a stand that we fought, and especially when we were buying the economy line stands, which a lot of people do, and there's nothing wrong with it. But as you're saying, Grant, I know exactly what you're talking about. It feels like you get one of those stands, and in a cold winter day, it feels like every single time, like you lean your back up or you just shift your weight, it'll pop. And I could see how that, the saddle would not do that.
Yeah, and kind of going on to that, I feel like lots of those pops come from ratchets and come from, the stand actually contacting the tree, as well as the stand itself. But talking about the size of the tree, I feel like we hit it pretty well right on the money. I felt like, to me, it looked like it covered about 2/3 of your torso, left to right. Not your entire torso. It wasn't entirely blocking your view. And, you could still, in your relaxed position, kind of look to the right side of the tree, look to the left side of the tree, and kind of observe what was going on. But in terms of the size of the tree, in inches, like if you were to take, a set of calipers out there, or, just kind of estimate it, wouldn't you?
That tree was big.
Yeah,
that tree was big. We had to find a perfect combination of trees for the shot that we wanted, because we wanted you to be in line with me where we thought the shot would take place.
Yep.
And I think if I were to do it, I think the perfect tree for a saddle would honestly be about a 10 to 12 incher, because it gives you, it's more forgiving for you to throw your lineman's belt around and work. That cherry tree that I was in at the base was probably 26 inches around. And where I was hanging was probably 22, 20 at the narrowest. Sure. It was big. It was big enough to where when I had to like bear hug it to get my, to get the lineman's belt instead of throwing it to me, I could just grab it. You know what I mean? So if you make a big circle with your hands, it was just smaller than that. So it was a healthy tree. I mean, it was a big one.
Sure. So you think so you would have rather been in a smaller tree then, huh?
I think so. I mean, because again, I'm not going to rely on the tree to hide me from the deer. You just got to be still and know when to draw and other factors. I just think that a smaller diameter tree would be easier and a little more forgiving, because A, to get your lineman's belt around, B, just to see, and then also, to kind of like pivot and move around, because the rope has way more surface area that it's touching on a big tree. So when I was like playing with it, when I was up there and kind of shimmying around, if I had to really open up to shoot the field, like I could do it within a certain degree, given that I had one stick, but you also have to like pull the rope as you do it, right? So if I have a smaller tree, that's less rope that's going to contact the tree, which should make it, in theory, easier to spin it around. You know what I'm saying? I don't think the bigger the tree is necessarily better for saddle hunting. I do think like that 10, 12, maybe 14-inch diameter tree would be like bread and butter saddle hunting. And
Sure.
that's just, again, this is coming from a guy that's hunted out of a saddle a time. And that's
Right.
just my 2 cents. So I'm by no stretch at all an expert on this measure.
Sure. So you would rather have the ease of getting in and out of the tree rather than the concealability of having a larger trunk to hide yourself, and just rely on being very still as opposed to being physically concealed by the tree in the moment of truth when the deer comes in.
Right, because what I was talking about earlier is in my mind, okay, animals don't have the same visions that humans do, and that's why you can get away with hunting in the deer stand because they have the same ability to process images as we did. We'd get picked all the time. But so like I'm thinking, okay, what do I look like? I'm a bark colored blob that looks like a crotch of a tree, right? That maybe has broken off. It happens all the time in the natural world because where my feet are essentially they are touching the trunk, and then I come off in a V-shaped pattern, just like when you see a tree fork or split.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, I would look very similar to it, and I'm not hunting in a saddle to use a tree to conceal me. That's a bonus, and I do think it does work, right? Because it breaks up the entire outline of your body. But if I were to look at myself from far away, I feel like I'd look like a split in a tree that the top broke off of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good observation and a good point I didn't even consider. You would really look like a broken off limb, you know?
Yep.
So kind of closing it out, the thoughts are kind of done. Now taking it to the hunt, we saw this doe group about 70, 80 yards away. There was a mature doe, 2 yearlings, and a smaller buck. I would say probably that 2-year-old 8 that we've been getting running around on camera, and he was bumping them through the woods. And he kind of bumped him off, and we were like, oh, man, maybe that was our shot. But then that same group ended up ditching the buck, coming back, and we saw her at about 60 yards. She walks down the trail exactly like she's supposed to, through the feathered gap, and at that point you had your bow taken off the hook, and she steps out and take it from there.
So she steps out to the trail was 21-ish yards, and we were hoping she would just walk out and go straight into the food plot, giving me 20, 22, 5-ish yard shot broadside. But when she hit the field, she turned straight away and she started headed down the food plot. So I'm already drawn at this point. As soon as she committed to the field, I drew back, and she turned and was now facing directly away from me. All I had was a Texas hard shot. And really, we were hoping the deer to walk out and come towards us, not away from us. So I had probably another 10 yards, 15 yards ish to my east, really, for her to walk before I could shoot and not have an opportunity because of the low hanging branches and stuff. So she comes out, she turns away, I'm drawn back, and she kind of opens up just a little bit. I had my pin set at 20. And she turned to probably be about 30, 31 yards. It was a quartering away shot.
Yep.
I purposely held low this time of year. Deer are usually a little bit more on edge. Probably going to duck more. But what I didn't do is I didn't factor in the fact that she had walked about 10 yards. So I shot. She ducked into the arrow, and the shot actually hit really well. Exited low body cavity on her, entered in about 6 inches up from the bottom of the chest cavity. And as soon as it hit, we saw blood squirt, and we laughed because we were like, there's no way deer can get through this edge feather. I mean, it's thick, it's gnarly. We cut down whole trees to make this.
Yep.
And that deer just took off, and I mean, pile drived through that edge feather. And that's when we're like, holy crap, we just got it done. You know?
Yeah. It was pretty cool the way that it all came out, and I was about I would say 6 to 8 feet higher than you, and I kind of got you and the deer in the same shot in the same frame. And for those of you guys that are watching on the inner circle and are in that Facebook group of ours, that clip is in there, and
Yep.
you can actually watch that on Wednesday on our YouTube channel. So I'm going to put that up there and cut it up this afternoon, probably throw that up there, and that kind of rounds us out on the discussion of our first saddle hunt ever. So again, we're not experts on the matter at all. Any final thoughts on the saddle before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, so I've had a host of people message me about it, and I'll give you my overview synopsis. So overview thinking, do I foresee us using it a lot in the future? And being honest with you guys, no, I don't. I don't see any clear, drastic, stark advantages to it with us hunting private ground. And why is that? It's because we're very mobile with our deer stands. We're very reactive as the year goes on, but we also have spots like in this edge feather where we will have pre-hung stands for prevailing wind, and it's nice, to be able to walk in, climb up in the stand with the hoist rope and the bow hook and everything set up and hunt. So I think if you're hunting primarily private ground, that I don't know if a saddle would be a good option for you. However, if you are in a scenario where you do have to hang a stand every time, if you're on public or you have limitations to the property that you're on, that's where I could see the saddle coming into advantage because of the lightweight and compactness of it. I mean, the entire saddle, the ropes, everything, will ball up and fit very easily into the bottom of a backpack if you didn't want to wear it. So as far as a minimalistic design, I do think the saddle could be a good option for somebody who is doing the public land hunting, or like you said, if you have limitations on the property you're on where they don't want you to have to stand up every time. Comfortable wise, it's comfortable. I felt secure. I felt safe. There was no issues there. And I do think they have their place in the hunting industry and community. It was neat. It's a box checked for us to get it done. And I'm sure we'll play with it, in the next season and try to do some other cool stuff with it. But I don't think it's going to be our go-to. That's just, I wanted to be honest with everybody. We do think they're neat, but I don't think it's going to be our bread and butter for killing deer in the future.
Sure. Well, those are good thoughts, and I'm glad that we got it done. That's our final deer of the year. Unless something really crazy happens in this next week, our season wraps up on Sunday. And yeah, that was a good way to end the deer season on a high note and kind of an interesting note for us. And other than that, I'm going to let you go here, finish up, and I will talk to you later.
All right. See you, buddy.
All right. Bye. Well, that was kind of the overall general consensus on our saddle hunt. More of Garrett's opinion than mine because, like I said, I was not hunting in a saddle. I was in a deer stand filming him hunt from a saddle, and it was pretty neat to be able to watch it all go down and kind of that third-person point of view where I could kind of see the deer, see him, see the shot, see everything on that same frame, and it was kind of something that we've never done before because typically we're both in the same tree, and we have more or less the same viewpoint. So it was pretty interesting from that perspective. Other than that, a couple of announcements. Our Throwback Thursdays are coming to a close at the end of January. We are officially out of them, and 2021 means that we're going to be coming up with some new things. And every Wednesday, you guys can watch a new episode of Last Breath Live all year long. So we'll make sure to let you guys know on social media when those are dropping and coming out. This Wednesday, 2 days from now, you'll be able to watch the hunt that we just talked about, our first hunt out of a saddle. And that'll be right there on our YouTube channel at about 7 p.m. And in terms of some new announcements, we're going to be making a new announcement. We actually have another podcast that's going to drop on Wednesday this week. So this is a 2-episode week for us. You have the one today on Monday as usual, and then another episode on Wednesday. So stay tuned to that one. That will be coming out at 6 a.m. on Wednesday. Pretty cool announcement to share with you guys then. Other than that, we will talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Last Breath Huntcast. Hopefully you learned a little bit today, even though, again, we're not masters on saddle hunting by any means, any stretch of the word, but maybe you picked up something, and if you're a rookie like we are, you can use it to go get it done out of a saddle. Thanks for listening. Don't waste it.